So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1854. The world is on the cusp of modernity, yet still deeply entrenched in the old ways, horse-drawn carriages rattling over cobblestone streets, gas lamps flickering in the foggy London night, and the distant echo of war drums reverberating across Europe. The Crimean Peninsula, a stretch of land jutting into the Black Sea, has become the unlikely stage for a brutal conflict that will change the course of history. It is a war born not of noble ideals, but of tangled alliances, imperial ambitions, and age-old rivalries. Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire have joined forces to halt the expansion of Russia, whose Tsar hungers for warm water ports and greater influence. The reasons for war are complicated, shrouded in diplomatic intrigue, and the ambitions of men in gilded halls far from the front lines. But for the thousands of young men shipped off to fight, and for the women who will soon follow them as nurses, the reasons matter little. What matters is survival. Imagine yourself standing on the bustling docks of Southampton, England, in the chill of early autumn. The air is thick with the briny scent of the sea, mingled with the sharp tang of coal smoke from the steamships that bob restlessly at their moorings. Soldiers in redcoats mill about, some laughing and boasting, others pale and silent with fear. Crates of supplies are being loaded, barrels of salted meat, sacks of hardtack, crates of ammunition, and, somewhere in the chaos, the first tentative shipments of medical supplies. You are not a soldier, but a nurse. Perhaps you are young, barely out of girlhood, or perhaps you are older, seasoned by years of caring for the sick in the crowded tenements of London. You have heard the call, a plea for volunteers to tend to the wounded in a far-off land. The newspapers are filled with stories of suffering, men dying not just from bullets and bayonets, but from disease, neglect, and the utter chaos of battlefield medicine. Florence Nightingale, a name already whispered with reverence in some circles and scorn in others, is assembling a team. You have answered her call. The journey ahead is daunting. The sea voyage alone will take weeks, and the destination, Scutari, on the outskirts of Istanbul, is a place most Britons know only from maps. The hospital there is rumored to be a place of horror, overcrowded, filthy, and hopelessly understaffed. But you are determined. Whether driven by duty, compassion, or a desire for adventure, you have left behind the familiar comforts of home for the unknown. As your ship pulls away from the dock, the reality of your decision begins to sink in. The coastline of England recedes into the mist, replaced by the endless gray expanse of the sea. The days blur together, endless hours of rolling waves, the creak of the ship's timbers, and the distant cries of gulls. You share cramped quarters with other nurses, some as nervous as you, others putting on a brave face. There is talk of what awaits, the wounded, the dying, the overwhelming need for care. There is also talk of Florence Nightingale herself, her strictness, her intelligence, her unwavering resolve. At night, as you lie in your narrow buck, you think of home, of the quiet streets, the familiar faces, the warmth of the hearth. You wonder if you will ever see them again. The journey is not without peril. Storms lash the ship, sending waves crashing over the deck and leaving everyone soaked and shivering. There is sickness, too seasickness at first, but soon more serious ailments. One of the nurses develops a fever, and there is little to be done but hope she recovers. The ship's doctor does his best, but his supplies are limited, and his knowledge, though greater than most, is still no match for the mysteries of disease. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the ship rounds the coast of Turkey and enters the Bosphorus Strait. The city of Istanbul rises before you, a breathtaking jumble of minarets, domes, and bustling markets. The air is warmer here, scented with spices and the distant promise of adventure. But there is little time to take in the sights. The wounded are waiting. You disembark and make your way through the crowded streets, following the lead of more experienced nurses. The journey to Scutari is long and exhausting, a blur of noise and color. The hospital itself is a vast, rambling building, once a barracks, now pressed into service as a makeshift hospital. The scale of the suffering is overwhelming. Men lie on straw mats in crowded wards, their faces pale and drawn. The air is thick with the smell of blood, sweat, and despair. This is the beginning of your journey. The days ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. You will witness suffering and courage, despair and hope. You will be pushed to the limits of your endurance, and you will discover strengths you never knew you possessed. But for now, as you stand in the shadow of Scutari Hospital, you take a deep breath and prepare to step inside. The world is changing, and you are about to become part of history. The city of Istanbul, ancient, mysterious, and teeming with life, slowly fades behind you as your carriage rattles along the uneven road towards Scutari. The journey is jarring, both for the body and the mind. You pass bustling markets where merchants hawk their wares in a dozen languages, and the air is thick with the scent of roasting chestnuts, strong coffee, and the ever-present tang of the sea. But the further you travel, the more the city's vibrancy gives way to the somber reality of war. The hospital at Scutari looms ahead, perched on a hill overlooking the Bosphorus. It is an imposing structure, once a proud barracks built by the Ottomans, now pressed into service as a hospital for the British Army. The building's yellowed stone walls are streaked with grime, its windows dark and foreboding. As your carriage pulls up to the entrance, you are struck by the sheer scale of the place. Hundreds of men, some limping, others carried on stretchers, move in and out of the great wooden doors. The air is filled with the low murmur of voices, punctuated by the occasional cry of pain. You step down from the carriage, your feet crunching on gravel. The weight of your mission settles on your shoulders. Around you, other nurses gather their meager belongings, their faces a mixture of determination and apprehension. A chill wind whips through the courtyard, tugging at your skirts and carrying with it the distant clang of church bells from the city below. Inside, the corridors are dim and echoing, the stone floors cold beneath your shoes. The air is heavy with the mingled scents of carbolic acid, unwashed bodies, and something darker, an undercurrent of fear and suffering that seems to seep from the very walls. You pass a row of orderlies, their uniforms stained and their faces drawn. They nod in greeting, but their eyes are wary. The hospital is a world apart, governed by its own rules and rhythms. You are led to a small office where a harried matron greets you with a curt nod. She thrusts a ledger into your hands and instructs you to sign your name. The list is long, filled with the names of nurses who have come before you, some still here, others lost to illness or exhaustion. As you write, your hand trembles ever so slightly. This is real now. There is no turning back. Your first task is to tour the wards. The matron leads you down a long corridor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She explains in a low voice that the hospital is desperately short of supplies, bandages, clean water, even beds. Many of the wounded lie on the floor, their wounds festering for lack of proper care. The doctors do what they can, but they are overwhelmed. The nurses, she says, are the last line of defense against chaos. The wards themselves are a vision from a nightmare. Rows of cots stretch into the gloom, each occupied by a wounded man. Some are missing limbs. Others have faces twisted in pain or fever. The air is thick with the sounds of suffering, groans, coughs, whispered prayers. Flies buzz incessantly, drawn by the scent of blood. You fight the urge to gag as you pass a man whose bandages are soaked through with pus and blood. At the far end of the ward, you see a small group of nurses tending to a soldier. They work quickly and efficiently, cleaning his wounds and murmuring words of comfort. One of them looks up and gives you a tired smile. There is camaraderie here, forged in the crucible of hardship. Your tour ends in the kitchens, where a pot of thin gruel bubbles on the stove. The cook, a stout woman with flour on her apron, offers you a bowl. You accept gratefully, though the taste is bland and the texture unappealing. Food, you realize, will be another challenge. The men need nourishment to heal, but supplies are scarce and the demands are endless. As evening falls, you are shown to your quarters, a small, cramped room shared with 3 other nurses. The beds are hard, the blankets thin, and the air is cold. Still, you are grateful for the chance to rest. You unpack your few possessions, a change of clothes, a worn Bible, a letter from home. These small comforts will have to sustain you in the days ahead. Before you sleep, you step outside onto a narrow balcony. The city lights twinkle across the water, and the distant call to prayer drifts on the night air. For a moment, you allow yourself to hope. Perhaps, with hard work and courage, you can make a difference here. Perhaps you can bring a measure of comfort to those who suffer. But as you return to your bed, the sounds of the hospital, cries, footsteps, the clatter of a dropped tray, remind you that tomorrow will bring new challenges. You close your eyes and pray for strength, knowing that your journey has only just begun. Dawn breaks reluctantly over Scutari, the pale light filtering through grimy windows and casting long shadows across the crowded wards. You rise from your narrow cot, stiff and cold, and prepare for your first full day in the hospital. The air is chill and heavy, thick with the scent of damp stone and something more sinister, an odor that clings to your clothes and skin, a constant reminder of the suffering within these walls. As you step into the main corridor, the full reality of your new world hits you. The hospital is a labyrinth of misery, its every corner filled with the wounded and the dying. The first thing you notice is the noise, a ceaseless chorus of groans, coughs, and whispered prayers, punctuated by the occasional scream as a surgeon works without the benefit of anesthesia. The sound is overwhelming, a living thing that presses in on you from all sides. You make your way to the largest ward, your footsteps echoing on the cold stone floor. The sight that greets you is almost beyond comprehension. Rows upon rows of men lie on straw mattresses, or, worse, directly on the floor, many with little more than a thin blanket to protect them from the chill. Some are missing limbs, their bandaged stumps already turning black with infection. Others lie motionless, their eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, lost in fever or delirium. The smell is indescribable. A mixture of sweat, blood, and excrement, it hangs in the air like a physical presence. You fight the urge to retch as you move between the beds, offering what comfort you can. Flies swarm everywhere, settling on open wounds and buzzing in the ears of the dying. Rats scurry along the walls, bold and unafraid, their eyes glinting in the dim light. You quickly realize that the hospital is desperately short on everything. Clean linen is a luxury. Most of the men lie in their own filth, their wounds left unattended for days at a time. There is almost no soap, and water is rationed carefully. The few towels available are stained and threadbare, passed from patient to patient until they are little more than rags. The staff, too, are overwhelmed. The doctors move from bed to bed, their faces drawn and weary. They do what they can, but the sheer number of patients is staggering. Many of the orderlies are little better than the patients themselves, untrained, exhausted, and often ill. They are expected to cook, clean, and nurse, but the reality is that most tasks go undone. The nurses, new and untested, are thrown into the chaos with little guidance or support. You are assigned your first patient, a young soldier named Thomas. He is barely more than a boy, his face pale and drawn, his leg wrapped in a filthy bandage. He looks at you with wide, frightened eyes as you approach. You do your best to clean his wound, using what little water you have, but the infection is already spreading. You whisper words of comfort, trying to hide your own fear. As the day wears on, you move from patient to patient, each case more desperate than the last. Some beg for water, their lips cracked and bleeding. Others plead for news of home, their voices barely more than a whisper. You do what you can, but it never feels like enough. In the afternoon, you are called to assist with an amputation. The surgeon, his hands shaking with exhaustion, works quickly, his saw biting through bone with a sickening crunch. There is no anesthesia, just a leather strap for the patient to bite down on and a bottle of brandy for after. You hold the man's hand as he screams, your knuckles white with the effort. When it is over, you help carry the severed limb to the pile outside. where it joins dozens of others. The day ends in exhaustion. Your hands are raw from scrubbing, your back aches from lifting and carrying. You collapse onto your cot, too tired even to cry. The sounds of the hospital, so constant, so unrelenting, follow you into your dreams. Yet even in the midst of this horror, there are moments of grace. A soldier smiles in gratitude as you bring him a cup of water. Another squeezes your hand, his eyes shining with hope. You cling to these moments, small as they are, and remind yourself why you are here. As night falls, you light a candle and sit by the window, staring out at the darkened city. You wonder how long you can endure this, how long anyone can. But you know that tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, you will rise and do it all again. Because if you do not, who will? The days at Scutari blur together in a relentless tide of suffering and exhaustion. You quickly come to realize that, for all the horrors endured by the wounded, the staff themselves are fighting a battle of their own. The hospital is a world unto itself, governed by chaos, desperation, and the constant threat of collapse. Every morning begins before dawn, the darkness outside only just giving way to the first pale hints of daylight. You and your fellow nurses rise quietly, careful not to disturb those who managed a few hours of precious sleep. The corridors are already alive with the groans of patients and the hurried footsteps of orderlies. There is no time for leisurely breakfasts or quiet reflection. The day's work begins at once. The staff at Scutari are a patchwork of personalities and backgrounds, thrown together by necessity rather than design. The doctors, many of them veterans of previous campaigns, are hardened by experience, but not immune to fatigue. You see it in their faces, the hollow eyes, the lines etched deep by worry and sleepless nights. Some are brusque and short-tempered, their patience worn thin by the endless demands. Others are gentle, their kindness a balm in the midst of suffering. But even the best of them are overwhelmed. The sheer number of wounded is staggering, and new arrivals come every day, their wounds fresh and their spirits battered. The doctors move from bed to bed, making quick decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. There is no time for careful deliberation. Amputations are performed in rapid succession, the floors slick with blood. Medicines are rationed, and often there is little more to offer than a kind word and a prayer. The orderlies fare no better. Many are untrained, pressed into service because there is simply no one else. They are expected to do everything: cook, clean, carry water, tend to the sick. Some rise to the challenge, their determination shining through even the darkest moments. Others falter, their spirits broken by the unending grind. You see them slumped in corners, their faces buried in their hands, or hear them muttering prayers under their breath as they scrub the floors. For the nurses, the challenges are even greater. You are newcomers, outsiders in a world dominated by military hierarchy and tradition. Some of the doctors are openly hostile, questioning your presence and your abilities. Others are merely indifferent, too preoccupied with their own burdens to offer guidance or support. You quickly learn to rely on one another, forming bonds of friendship and solidarity that help you endure. The work is unending. Every task is a struggle against time and scarcity. There are never enough bandages, never enough clean water, never enough hands to do what needs to be done. You improvise constantly, tearing old sheets into strips for dressings, boiling water over makeshift stoves, fashioning splints from whatever wood you can find. The smallest victories, a wound cleaned, a fever broken, are cause for celebration. Yet the toll is immense. You watch as your fellow nurses fall ill, their bodies succumbing to the same diseases that ravage the patients. Some recover, their spirits undimmed. Others are not so lucky. The loss is keenly felt, a reminder of the fragility of life in this place. Despite it all, there are moments of grace. You see it in the quiet determination of a doctor who refuses to give up on a hopeless case, in the gentle touch of an orderly comforting a dying man, and the laughter that sometimes echoes through the corridors despite everything. These moments sustain you, reminding you that even in the darkest times, humanity endures. As the sun sets and the wards grow quiet, you find a moment to rest. You sit with your fellow nurses, sharing stories and memories of home. The camaraderie is a lifeline, a reminder that you are not alone in this struggle. Together, you face each new day, determined to do what you can, no matter how small. And as you drift off to sleep, the sounds of the hospital fading into the background, you hold on to the hope that tomorrow will bring relief, not just for the wounded, but for those who care for them as well. The longer you serve at Scutari, the more you come to understand that the greatest enemy here is not the Russian army, nor the wounds of war, but the invisible armies of disease that stalked the wards day and night. The hospital, meant as a refuge for the wounded, has become a breeding ground for death. Typhus, cholera, dysentery, and typhoid fever sweep through the cramped corridors with terrifying speed, claiming more lives than bullets or bayonets ever could. Each morning, as you begin your rounds, you brace yourself for the new casualties, not of battle, but of infection. The men lie feverish and delirious, their skin flushed or clammy, their eyes sunken and wild. Some shiver uncontrollably, teeth chattering as they clutch thin blankets to their chests. Others burn with fever, their bodies racked by violent spasms or endless vomiting. The stench of sickness is everywhere, clinging to your hair and clothes, seeping into your very bones. You try to keep your spirits up, to focus on the tasks at hand, changing bandages, offering sips of water, wiping fevered brows. But it is hard not to feel helpless as you watch one patient after another slip away, their strength drained by illnesses you can barely name, let alone cure. The doctors do what they can, but their knowledge is limited, and their resources even more so. There are no antibiotics, no 4 drips, no modern miracles. The best you can offer is comfort and cleanliness, and even that is a constant struggle. The hospital's water supply is tainted, the wells fouled by sewage that seeps up from the overburdened drains. You and the other nurses do your best to boil water for drinking and cleaning, but fuel is scarce, and the fires burn low. Sometimes the only water available is cloudy and foul-smelling, but there is no choice. Thirst is a crueler torment than the risk of disease. Flies are everywhere, crawling over wounds, settling on food, buzzing in the air. You swat them away as best you can, but they always return, drawn by the scent of blood and decay. Maggots infest the worst wounds, and though you have learned that they sometimes help by eating dead flesh, the sight is still enough to turn your stomach. Rats scurry along the walls and under the beds, bold and fat from the endless supply of food and filth. At night, the situation grows even more desperate. The darkness seems to magnify the suffering, and the cries of the sick echo through the halls. You move from bed to bed, lantern in hand, doing what you can to ease the pain. Sometimes all you can offer is a gentle touch, a whispered prayer, or a promise to write a letter home. You see the fear in the men's eyes, the knowledge that they are far from home, dying in a foreign land with no one but strangers to care for them. You are not immune to the dangers yourself. Several of the nurses have already fallen ill, their strength sapped by the same fevers that ravage the patients. You worry constantly about your own health, watching for the first signs of sickness, a headache, a sore throat, a sudden chill. But there is no time to dwell on your fears. The work must go on. You learn to recognize the symptoms of each disease, to distinguish the rashes of typhus from the sunken eyes of cholera, the bloody stools of dysentery from the relentless vomiting of typhoid. You become adept at improvising treatments, using vinegar to clean wounds, mixing herbal teas to soothe upset stomachs, fashioning makeshift masks from scraps of cloth. Every small victory feels like a triumph, every loss a personal defeat. The death toll mounts. Each morning, the orderlies carry away the bodies, wrapped in rough blankets and loaded onto carts for burial. There is little ceremony, little time for mourning. The living need your attention, and there are always more arriving, fresh from the front, wounded and terrified, or already burning with fever. Through it all, you cling to hope. You see it in the small acts of kindness that persist even in the darkest moments. A soldier sharing his last crust of bread with a friend, a doctor pausing to comfort a dying man, a nurse singing softly to a patient in the night. These moments remind you that, even in the face of overwhelming suffering, humanity endures. And so you press on, day after day, fighting not just for the lives of your patients, but for your own sanity and spirit. Disease may be everywhere, but so too is courage, compassion, and the unbreakable will to survive. In the midst of the chaos, when hope seems as thin as the broth served to the wounded, a new force begins to stir within the walls of Scutari. Florence Nightingale, the woman whose name is already whispered with awe and skepticism alike, steps forward, not as a savior, but as a determined leader with a vision for change. You first see her in the early morning, moving through the wards with a quiet authority that commands respect. She is not loud, nor does she seek attention, but her presence is unmistakable. Her eyes, sharp and clear, miss nothing. The soiled bandages, the dirty floors, the frightened faces of the men. She listens more than she speaks, taking in every detail, every complaint, every whispered plea for help. It does not take long for her to act. Nightingale quickly assembles the nurses, her voice calm but firm as she outlines her plan. Cleanliness, she insists, is the foundation of healing. Disease, she explains, thrives in filth and neglect. If the wounded are to have any chance of survival, the hospital itself must be transformed. The work begins at once. Nightingale uses her own funds to purchase Turkish towels, soap, and clean shirts from the markets in Istanbul. She organizes the nurses into teams, each with a specific task. One group scrubs the floors, another washes linens, a third tends to the kitchen and food supplies. The transformation is slow and grueling, but her determination is infectious. Even the most skeptical nurses find themselves swept up in her vision. You are assigned to the cleaning team. Armed with buckets of water and stiff brushes, you attack the grime that coats every surface. The work is exhausting. Your hands blister and your back aches. But with each passing day, the wards begin to change. The floors, once slick with filth, begin to shine. The air, heavy with the stench of decay, grows fresher as windows are opened and the rooms are aired out. Nightingale insists on order and discipline. She keeps meticulous records, tracking the supplies used, the number of patients treated, the progress made each day. She is relentless in her pursuit of cleanliness, inspecting the wards herself and refusing to accept anything less than perfection. Some of the doctors grumble at her interference, but even they cannot deny the results. The nurses, too, are transformed. Under Nightingale's guidance, you learn new techniques for wound care and sanitation. You wash your hands before and after tending to each patient, a practice that seems obvious now but was revolutionary at the time. You change bandages more frequently, using boiled water and clean cloth whenever possible. You pay attention to the smallest details: fresh air, dry bedding, nutritious food. The changes are not just physical, but psychological as well. The men, once resigned to their suffering, begin to take heart. They see the nurses working tirelessly, cleaning and caring, and their spirits lift. Some even begin to help, sweeping the floors or fetching water for their comrades. The atmosphere in the wards shifts from despair to cautious optimism. Nightingale's reforms extend beyond the wards. She overhauls the kitchens, insisting on better food for the patients. Simple, nourishing meals that give them strength to heal. She organizes the storage of supplies, ensuring that nothing is wasted and that the most critical needs are always met. She even arranges for letters from home to be delivered, understanding that a soldier's morale is as important as his physical health. There are setbacks, of course. Supplies run low, and tempers flare as the pressure mounts. Some of the staff resist the changes, clinging to old habits and resentful of Nightingale's authority. But she is undeterred. She works longer hours than anyone, often seen walking the wards late at night, checking on each patient by the light of her lamp. You find yourself inspired by her example. The work is still hard, the suffering still immense, but now there is a sense of purpose, a belief that things can and will improve. You see the results in the faces of the men you care for, their wounds healing, their fevers breaking, their eyes brightening with hope. Nightingale's reforms are not just about cleanliness or order, they are about dignity. She treats every patient with respect, no matter how poor or badly wounded. She insists that the men be called by their names, not just their ranks or injuries. She listens to their stories, comforts them in their pain, and honors their humanity. As the weeks pass, the changes become undeniable. Mortality rates begin to drop, and the hospital, once a place of despair, becomes a beacon of hope. The work is far from over. There are always new challenges, new crises to face. But now, for the first time, you believe that victory is possible. And so you press on, inspired by Nightingale's vision and strengthened by the knowledge that, together, you are making a difference. One clean sheet, one healed wound, one life at a time. Change, even when desperately needed, rarely comes without resistance. As Florence Nightingale's reforms take root in the wards of Scutari, you and your fellow nurses find yourselves facing not only the daily grind of suffering and scarcity, but also the entrenched skepticism and, at times, outright hostility of those around you. It begins subtly, in the clipped tones of certain doctors as they issue orders, their eyes lingering a moment too long on the fresh linens or the newly scrubbed floors. Some of the older surgeons, men who have spent their careers in the rigid hierarchy of the British Army, view the arrival of female nurses as an affront to tradition. They mutter among themselves about meddling women and interference. Their voice is low, but their meaning clear. For them, the presence of women in the hospital is a breach of the natural order, a challenge to their authority. You notice it in the way they question your every move. A nurse brings a patient a cup of broth, and a doctor demands to know why she has left her post. Another nurse dares to suggest that a wound be cleaned more thoroughly, and she is met with a withering glare. Suggestions are dismissed, advice ignored. The message is unmistakable. You are here to assist, not to innovate. The orderlies, too, are wary. Many are young men, untrained and overwhelmed, struggling to keep up with the endless demands of the hospital. Some resent the nurses, seeing them as competitors for the approval of the doctors or the gratitude of the patients. Others are simply uncomfortable, unsure how to behave around women in a place that has always been the domain of men. There are awkward silences, nervous glances, and the occasional crude joke whispered behind your back. Even among the nurses, there is tension. Not all are convinced by Nightingale's methods. Some, especially those who have come from the more traditional religious orders, are uncomfortable with her insistence on cleanliness and order. They are used to a different way of caring, one that emphasizes prayer and spiritual comfort over practical measures. There are disagreements over how best to tend to the sick, over the allocation of scarce resources, over the very nature of nursing itself. Florence Nightingale, for her part, is undeterred. She meets resistance with quiet determination, her resolve unshaken by criticism or doubt. She attends meetings with the doctors, listens patiently to their objections, and then calmly presents her case. She cites statistics, points to the improvements in patient outcomes, and refuses to back down. Her authority is not derived from her gender or her position, but from her results. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the staff begin to come around. But the struggle is real. and it takes its toll. You see it in the hunched shoulders of your fellow nurses, in the tears shed in private after a particularly harsh rebuke, in the moments of doubt that creep in during the long, sleepless nights. You, too, feel the sting of criticism, the weight of expectation. There are times when you wonder if it is worth it, if the fight for change is simply too hard. And yet, there are moments of triumph. A doctor who once dismissed your efforts now asks for your opinion on a difficult case. An orderly who grumbled about your presence now helps you carry water or fetch clean linens. Patients, seeing the improvements in their care, begin to speak up in your defense. The tide, slow as it is, begins to turn. Through it all, Nightingale remains a steady presence. She encourages you to stand firm, to trust in your training and your instincts. She reminds you that every small victory matters, that every life saved is a testament to the power of persistence. You draw strength from her example, and from the camaraderie of your fellow nurses. In time, the resistance begins to fade. The results speak for themselves. Cleaner wards, fewer infections, more men returning to health. The skeptics, faced with undeniable evidence, have no choice but to concede. Change, once unthinkable, becomes the new reality. But you never forget the struggle. The memory of those early days, of doubt, of resistance, of the fight for respect, remains with you, a reminder that progress is never easy, but always worth pursuing. In the ever-shifting tapestry of Scutari's Hospital, another thread weaves quietly but indelibly through the chaos: the Irish Sisters of Mercy. Led by the resolute Mary Clare Moore and the formidable Mary Frances Bridgman, these women have answered the call to serve, their faith and discipline as much a part of their uniform as their black veils and starched wimples. You first notice the sisters in the early morning light, moving silently through the wards, their presence marked by a calm efficiency and a gentle authority. Unlike many of the lay nurses, the sisters are accustomed to hardship. Back in Ireland, famine and poverty had been their daily companions, and their work among the destitute had prepared them for suffering on a scale few could imagine. Here, in the echoing halls of Scutari, their experience is both a comfort and a challenge. The sisters' day begins before dawn, with prayers whispered in the dim light of their cramped quarters. Their faith is a source of strength, a shield against despair. They move as one, tending to the sick with practiced hands and quiet words. Their presence brings a sense of order to the chaos, a reminder, even to the most broken men, that compassion endures. Yet, their journey is not without difficulty. The Sisters of Mercy, though respected by some, are viewed with suspicion by others. In a hospital dominated by British military authority, their Irish accents and Catholic faith set them apart. There are whispered rumors, questions about their loyalty, their motives, their methods. Some of the doctors, already wary of female nurses, are doubly skeptical of these women in religious habit. Mary Clare Moore, the leader of the group, navigates these tensions with grace and firmness. She is a woman of deep conviction, unafraid to speak her mind when the welfare of her patients is at stake. You witness her standing toe-to-toe with a British officer, calmly insisting that her sisters be allowed to tend to the most desperate cases. Her authority is quiet but unyielding, rooted in a lifetime of service. Mary Frances Bridgman, her second in command, is equally formidable. Where Moore is diplomatic, Bridgman is direct, a force of nature who brooks no nonsense. She leads her sisters into the filthiest corners of the hospital, scrubbing floors, washing wounds, and bringing comfort to those the rest of the staff would rather forget. Her laughter, rare but genuine, is a balm in the bleakness of the wards. The sisters' methods are sometimes at odds with those of Florence Nightingale and her team. Nightingale, ever the reformer, insists on strict hygiene and military discipline. The sisters, while equally devoted to cleanliness, bring a different approach, one shaped by years of tending to Ireland's poor. They emphasize spiritual care as much as physical, offering prayers and sacraments alongside poultices and bandages. There are moments of tension between the two camps, as each struggles to assert their vision of nursing. Nightingale, with her meticulous records and tireless rounds, sometimes views the sisters' religious rituals as a distraction from the practical work at hand. The sisters, in turn, bristle at what they see as Nightingale's rigid authority and lack of spiritual sensitivity. Yet, in the crucible of Scutari, necessity forges an uneasy alliance. You see it in the way the sisters and Nightingale's nurses come together in moments of crisis, working side by side to save a man burning with fever or to comfort a dying boy far from home. Differences are set aside, if only for a moment, in the face of suffering that knows no boundaries. For the patients, the presence of the sisters is a blessing. Many of the Irish soldiers, far from home and fearful for their souls, find solace in the familiar prayers and gentle touch of the Sisters of Mercy. Even those of other faiths are comforted by their kindness, their willingness to listen, to sit quietly at a bedside, to offer a hand to hold in the darkest hours. You come to admire the sisters, their resilience, and their courage. Their faith is not a barrier, but a bridge, a source of strength that sustains them through the long nights and endless days. In the quiet moments, you find yourself drawn to their chapel, the soft glow of candlelight and the murmur of prayer a welcome respite from the noise and chaos of the hospital. Through their example, you learn that there are many ways to serve, many paths to compassion. The Sisters of Mercy, with their black veils and steadfast hearts, are a reminder that even in the midst of war, kindness and faith can light the way. At Scutari, the days are long, and the nights are longer still. The rhythm of life in the hospital is dictated not by clocks, but by the endless needs of the wounded and the sick. As a nurse, you quickly learn that time is elastic here, a blur of tasks, crises, and fleeting moments of rest, stitched together by exhaustion and duty. Your day begins before the sun has even considered rising. The cold stone floor bites at your bare feet as you dress in the half-dark, careful not to wake your roommates. The air is thick with the mingled scents of carbolic acid, stale bread, and the ever-present undertone of sickness. You tie your apron, pin your hair, and step into the corridor, already alive with the low hum of voices and the shuffle of tired feet. The first task is always the rounds. Armed with a battered ledger and a stub of pencil, you move from bed to bed, checking on each patient. You note their temperatures, the state of their wounds, the color of their skin. Some greet you with a weak smile or a whispered word of thanks. Others are lost in fever dreams or too far gone to notice your presence. You change bandages, wash faces, offer sips of water. Each act is small, but together they form the backbone of care. Breakfast is a hurried affair, if it happens at all. Sometimes there is porridge, thin and lumpy, or a crust of bread dipped in weak tea. More often, you snatch a bite between tasks, your mind already racing ahead to the next crisis. The kitchen is a place of constant activity, the cooks and orderlies working frantically to stretch meager supplies into something resembling a meal. You help when you can, peeling potatoes or stirring pots, but the demands of the wards always pull you back. The rest of the morning is a blur of activity. You help lift men to change their bedding, scrub floors to keep infection at bay, and fetch water from the well, always a precious commodity. You assist the doctors during rounds, holding lamps or instruments as they examine wounds and make their grim calculations. Sometimes you are called to help with an amputation or to comfort a man as he breathes his last. There is no time to dwell on sorrow. There are always more waiting. By midday, fatigue has set in, but there is no pause. You and the other nurses gather briefly in a corner of the ward, sharing a few whispered words of encouragement or a nervous laugh. The camaraderie is a lifeline, a reminder that you are not alone in the struggle. Together, you face the unending demands of the day, one patient, one crisis, one small act of kindness at a time. The afternoons bring new challenges. Fresh casualties arrive from the front, their wounds raw and their eyes haunted. You help triage the new arrivals, cleaning wounds, offering water, and doing your best to ease their pain. The work is relentless, and the line between day and night blurs as you move from task to task. There are moments of grace, too. A soldier recovers from fever and manages a shaky smile. A letter from home arrives, bringing tears of joy to a homesick patient. You find a moment to sit by a window, the sunlight warm on your face, and remember that there is a world beyond these walls. These small victories sustain you, giving you the strength to carry on. As evening falls, the pace slows, but the work does not end. You help prepare the evening meal, distribute medicines, and settle the men for the night. The wards grow quiet. The only sounds the soft murmur of voices and the distant cry of a gull over the Bosphorus. You take a moment to write in your journal, recording the events of the day and the names of those you have cared for. It is a small act of remembrance, a way to honor the lives that passed through your hands. Finally, you return to your quarters, your body aching and your mind numb with fatigue. You share a few words with your roommates, sometimes a laugh, sometimes a tear, before collapsing onto your cot. Sleep comes quickly, but it is never deep. The cries of the sick and the wounded echo through your dreams, a constant reminder that tomorrow will bring more of the same. Yet, despite the exhaustion, you rise each morning and do it all again. The daily grind is unending, but so too is your resolve. In the face of suffering, you find purpose. In the midst of chaos, you find strength. And in the quiet moments between tasks, you remember why you came, to bring comfort, to offer hope, and to bear witness to the courage of those who fight for life in the shadow of war. The physical hardships of Scutari are relentless, but it is the invisible wounds, the ones carried in the heart and mind, that cut the deepest. As the weeks turn into months, you begin to realize that the greatest challenge of nursing in the Crimean War is not the endless labor or even the constant threat of disease, but the emotional burden that grows heavier with each passing day. At first, you try to shield yourself. You focus on the tasks at hand, the bandages to change, the wounds to clean, the meals to serve. You tell yourself that you're strong, that you can bear whatever comes. But as the faces of the men you care for become familiar, as their stories become woven into your own, the walls you have built begin to crumble. You remember the first time you sat with a dying soldier through the long hours of the night. His name was Edward, a boy not much older than your youngest brother. He had come to Scutari with a bullet wound to the chest, his uniform stained with blood and mud. For days, you tended to him, bringing water and changing his dressings, whispering words of comfort as fever raged through his body. He spoke of home, of his mother's garden, and the dog he left behind. In his final hours, he clung to your hand, his grip growing weaker as dawn approached. When he slipped away, you felt a piece of yourself go with him. There are so many like Edward. Each day, you write letters for the dying, their trembling words dictated through pain and fear. "Tell my wife I love her," one whispers. "Tell my father I did my duty," says another. You do your best to capture their voices, to offer a last connection to the world they are leaving behind. When the letters are finished, you tuck them into envelopes, sealing them with a silent prayer. The grief is cumulative. It settles in your bones, a weight that grows heavier with each loss. Some nights, you find yourself weeping quietly in the darkness, the tears slipping down your cheeks as you remember the faces of those you could not save. You are not alone in your sorrow. The other nurses, too, carry their own burdens. You see it in the way they linger by a bedside, in the tightness of their smiles, in the silence that falls when the day's work is done. The men, too, are haunted by what they have seen. Some wake screaming from nightmares, their minds trapped in the horrors of the battlefield. Others withdraw into themselves, their eyes dull and distant. You do what you can to comfort them, offering a kind word, a gentle touch, a moment of quiet companionship. Sometimes, all you can do is sit beside them, bearing witness to their pain. There are moments when the weight feels unbearable. You question your own strength, your ability to go on. You wonder if anything you do truly matters, if the suffering will ever end. In those moments, you turn to small rituals for solace, a whispered prayer, a passage from your worn Bible, a letter from home. These fragments of normalcy are lifelines, reminders of a world beyond the hospital walls. Florence Nightingale understands the toll. She moves through the wards at night, her lamp casting soft pulls of light in the darkness. She pauses at each bed, offering words of comfort, a reassuring touch. She listens to your fears, your doubts, your grief. We must care for ourselves as well as for our patients, she reminds you. Compassion is not a well that runs dry, but a river that must be replenished. You learn to lean on your fellow nurses, to share your burdens as well as your joys. There are moments of laughter amid the sorrow, a joke whispered over a pot of tea, a song sung softly in the laundry room, a story shared in the quiet hours before dawn. These moments of connection are as vital as any medicine, a reminder that you are not alone in your struggle. Over time, you develop the kind of resilience, a strength born not of denial, but of acceptance. You learn to honor the lives that pass through your hands, to celebrate the small victories as fiercely as you mourn the losses. You find meaning in the work, purpose in the pain. You come to understand that to care deeply is both a blessing and a burden, and that the wounds you carry are a testament to your humanity. As you lie in bed at the end of another long day, the sounds of the hospital fading into the night, you reflect on all you have seen and done. The faces of the men you have cared for drift through your mind, each one a story, a memory, a life. You know that you will never forget them, that their courage and suffering will stay with you long after the war is over. And so you close your eyes, take a deep breath, and prepare to rise again tomorrow, ready to face whatever comes, to offer comfort and hope in a world that so desperately needs both. Night falls quietly over Scutari, the last rays of sunlight slipping behind the hills and leaving the hospital cloaked in shadow. The city beyond the Bosphorus settles into a hush, broken only by the distant call to prayer and the low hum of wind off the water. Within the hospital's stone walls, the day's chaos softens into a different kind of urgency, a stillness thick with pain, hope, and the quiet work of healing. This is the hour when Florence Nightingale becomes a legend. Lantern in hand, she glides through the darkened corridors, her presence as steady and gentle as the light she carries. You watch her sometimes, moving from bed to bed, pausing to check a fevered brow or whisper a word of comfort. The soldiers call her the lady with the lamp, and you see the awe in their eyes as she passes. For many, her nightly rounds are the only constant in a world turned upside down by war. You too, take your turn on night duty. The routine is both familiar and strange, the hospital transformed by darkness into a place of shadows and whispers. You move quietly, your footsteps muffled by the stone floors, careful not to disturb those who have finally found sleep. The wards are dim, lit only by the flicker of lanterns and the pale glow of moonlight through high windows. Night brings its own challenges. Fevers spike, wounds bleed, and the men's fears grow sharper in the absence of daylight. Some wake from nightmares, their cries echoing down the corridors. Others lie awake, staring at the ceiling, lost in memories of home or haunted by the faces of fallen friends. You do what you can to soothe them, offering water, adjusting blankets, sitting quietly at their side until the terror passes. There is a different rhythm to the hospital at night. The pace is slower, the demands less frantic, but the work is no less vital. You check on each patient, noting changes in their condition, watching for the first signs of infection or decline. You change dressings by lantern light, your hands steady despite the fatigue that tugs at your eyelids. You listen for the ragged breaths of those near the end, ready to summon the chaplain or simply hold a hand as the final moments slip away. Sometimes, you find yourself alone in the corridor, the silence pressing in around you. In those moments, you feel the weight of the hospital's suffering, the accumulated pain of hundreds of men, each fighting his own battle. The darkness magnifies every sound, the creak of a bed, the soft murmur of a prayer, the distant clatter of a dropped cup. You remind yourself to breathe, to focus on the task at hand, to let the routine carry you through the night. There are moments of grace too. You see it in the way a soldier's face softens as you tuck a blanket around his shoulders, or in the whispered "thank you" from a man too weak to lift his head. You witness small acts of kindness, a nurse sharing a crust of bread, an orderly pausing to comfort a frightened patient, a doctor lingering at a bedside long after his shift has ended. These moments are the heart of the night, the quiet proof that compassion endures even in the darkest hours. Florence Nightingale's presence is a comfort to you as well. You watch her pause at each bed, her lamp casting a warm circle of light in the glow. She asks after each patient by name, her memory for details astonishing. She offers encouragement to the nurses, a word of praise here, a gentle correction there. Her calm steadies you, reminding you that even the smallest act of care can make a difference. As the night wears on, exhaustion seeps into your bones. You fight to stay alert, to keep your mind focused on the needs of the men around you. You find solace in the routine, the measured steps from bed to bed, the familiar weight of the ledger in your hand, the soft glow of your own lantern lighting the way. You know that dawn will come, that the world will shift again, and the cycle will begin anew. When the first light of morning creeps through the windows, you feel a quiet sense of accomplishment. Another night survived, another round of suffering eased, another handful of lives touched by your care. You return to your quarters, your body heavy with fatigue, but your heart a little lighter. You have done your part, and in the quiet hours of the night, that is enough. As you drift into a brief, dreamless sleep, you carry with you the memory of the night's work, the faces of the men you comforted, the soft glow of the lamp, the gentle presence of Florence Nightingale moving through the darkness. You know that you will rise again, ready to face another day, another night, another round of hope and healing in the shadow of war. Scarcity is the constant companion of every nurse at Scutari. The hospital is a place of need for food, for warmth, for medicine, for hope. Yet, perhaps most pressing of all is the need for supplies. Every day, you and your fellow nurses face the reality that the tools of your trade are in painfully short supply, and that necessity is the mother of invention in ways you never imagined. It begins with the basics. Clean bandages, so essential for fighting infection, are a luxury. The crates sent from England are lost, delayed, or arrive with far less than what was promised. You quickly learn to make do. Old sheets, torn into strips, become dressings. Shirts donated by soldiers or scavenged from the dead are boiled, scrubbed, and repurposed. Every scrap of linen is precious, and nothing is wasted. You become adept at judging the worth of a rag, the absorbency of a towel, the strength of a thread. Soap, too, is a rare commodity. What little you have is rationed carefully, reserved for the worst wounds with the filthiest hands. You learn to stretch it, to use just enough to clean without wasting a drop. When the soap runs out, you improvise, scrubbing with hot water alone, or mixing ashes and sand to scour the worst grime from your skin and your patient's wounds. Even water is not guaranteed. The wells at Scutari are often tainted, the pipes unreliable. You and the other nurses take turns hauling buckets from the nearest safe source, your arms aching as you carry the heavy loads up and down the endless flights of stairs. Sometimes, the water is cloudy or foul-smelling, but you have no choice. You boil it when you can, but fuel for the stoves is also scarce. Wood and coal are hoarded like gold, and every fire is carefully tended, every ember coaxed to last a little longer. Food is another daily struggle. The kitchens are a place of constant improvisation, the cooks and nurses working together to stretch meager supplies into meals that are at least filling, if not nourishing. You learn to make soup from bones and scraps, to bake bread from the coarsest flour, to find ways to flavor porridge with herbs gathered from the hospital grounds. The men are always hungry, their bodies burning through calories as they fight to heal. You do your best to provide, knowing that a hot meal can be as healing as any medicine. Medicine itself is perhaps the most precious resource of all. The doctor's stores are pitifully small: opium, laudanum, quinine, and a handful of other remedies, all in short supply. You learn to ration every dose, to weigh the needs of one patient against another. When the medicines run out, you turn to old remedies: poultices of bread and milk, compresses of vinegar and herbs, teas brewed from whatever plants you can find. Sometimes the old ways work. Sometimes they are all you have. Improvisation becomes second nature. You fashion splints from broom handles and crates, use strips of leather to bind wounds, and repurpose kitchen utensils as surgical tools. You make pillows from straw and blankets from old coats. You learn to see every object not for what it is, but for what it could become in a moment of need. There are moments of frustration, when a patient's wound festers for lack of clean dressings, when a fever rages because there is no quinine left, when you must choose which man will eat and which will go hungry. The choices weigh on you, each one a reminder of the limits of your power. You do your best to hide your worry from the men, offering a smile and a gentle word even when your own hope is running thin. Yet, there is also pride in your resourcefulness. You and your fellow nurses become experts in making something from nothing, and finding solutions where none seem possible. You share tips and tricks, celebrate small victories, and laugh together at the absurdity of your inventions. In these moments, you find camaraderie and strength, a sense of accomplishment that helps carry you through the hardest days. The shortages never truly end. Each new shipment is a cause for celebration, each lost crate a blow to morale. But you learn to adapt, to make do, to keep going even when the odds are against you. In the end, it is not the supplies that matter most, but the determination and ingenuity of those who care for the wounded. As you lie in bed at the end of another long day, your hands raw from scrubbing and your body aching from the effort, you reflect on all you have accomplished with so little. You know that tomorrow will bring new challenges, new shortages, new opportunities for improvisation. But you are ready. You have learned that, in the crucible of war, necessity is not just the mother of invention, it is the heartbeat of survival. As the winter of 1855 deepens, hope seems to flicker and fade in the stone corridors of Scutari. The hospital is still a place of suffering and improvisation, but now, beneath the surface, a new threat is making itself known. The very building itself has become an accomplice to death. The numbers are grim. More men are dying from disease than from wounds. The air is heavy with the scent of rot and despair, and even the most optimistic among you begin to wonder if anything can turn the tide. It is in this darkest hour that word spreads of a new arrival, a government delegation known as the Sanitary Commission. They are not soldiers or doctors, but engineers, inspectors, and public health experts, sent from London in response to Florence Nightingale's desperate pleas and the damning reports in the British press. Their mission is simple and monumental: to save lives by attacking the filth and squalor that have taken root in the hospital's very foundations. You watch as the Commission's members arrive, their faces set with determination, their boots caked with mud from the journey. They carry not stethoscopes or scalpels, but clipboards, measuring tapes, and tools for opening drains and digging trenches. At first, their presence is met with skepticism. Some of the old guard mutter about interference, while others simply doubt that anything can be done. But the Commission wastes no time. They begin their work with a thorough inspection, moving through the wards with a critical eye. They peer into corners, lift floorboards, and trace the course of pipes and drains. What they find is worse than anyone imagined: locked sewers, overflowing cesspools, stagnant water pooling beneath the floors. The very air you breathe is thick with invisible poisons, the result of years of neglect and overcrowding. Under the Commission's direction, a transformation begins. Teams of laborers are brought in, their shovels and picks clanging through the night as they dig new drains and clear away years of filth. The old cesspools are emptied and filled with lime. The floors are scrubbed and scoured, and the windows, so long kept closed against the cold, are thrown open to let in the fresh sea air. Fires are lit in every ward, not just for warmth, but to help dry the damp and drive away the miasma that clings to every surface. You and your fellow nurses are enlisted in the effort. Your daily routines now, including the scrubbing of walls, the washing of every scrap of linen, and the careful monitoring of cleanliness in every corner of the hospital. Florence Nightingale herself works alongside the Commission, her resolve steeled by the knowledge that this, at last, is the change she has fought for. The work is exhausting, but the results are swift and dramatic. Within weeks, the mortality rate begins to drop. The men who once coughed and shivered in the fetid air now breathe more easily, their wounds healing faster, their spirits rising. The wards, once dark and oppressive, are brighter and cleaner, the sunlight streaming through windows that have not been opened in months. There are setbacks, of course. The winter cold is bitter, and the hospital's ancient walls are slow to yield their damp. Supplies are still scarce, and tempers sometimes flare as the pressure mounts. But the sense of progress is undeniable. For the first time, you feel that you are not merely fighting a losing battle, but that victory, over disease, over despair, is within reach. The Sanitary Commission's work extends beyond the hospital itself. They teach you and the other staff the principles of sanitation: how to keep water clean, how to dispose of waste safely, how to recognize the first signs of an outbreak. These lessons are simple, but revolutionary. You realize that you are not just caring for the sick, but helping to build a new foundation for health and survival. Florence Nightingale is tireless in her support. She writes letters to London, demanding more supplies, more support, more recognition for the importance of sanitation. She gathers data, tracking the improvements in mortality and recovery, her famous rose diagrams beginning to take shape in the margins of her journals. She is vindicated, at last, in her belief that cleanliness is as vital as medicine. As spring approaches, the hospital is transformed. The air is fresher, the wards brighter, the men stronger. The work of the Sanitary Commission is far from glamorous, but it has saved countless lives. You look back on the months of filth and despair and marvel at how much has changed. You know that the lessons learned here will echo far beyond Scutari, shaping the future of nursing and medicine for generations to come. And as you walk the now clean corridors, the sunlight warming your face, you feel a sense of pride and hope. The battle is not over, but for the first time, you believe that it can be won. In a place where suffering is measured in endless days and sleepless nights, it is the small victories that sustain you. At Scutari, you learn to celebrate each flicker of hope, each moment when the tide of despair is pushed back, even if only for a breath or a heartbeat. These triumphs are rarely dramatic. They come quietly, often unnoticed by those outside the hospital's walls. But for you and your fellow nurses, they are everything. You see it first in the faces of the men. Where once there was only resignation, now you catch glimpses of determination. A soldier who, after weeks of fever, manages to sit up in bed. Another who, despite the loss of a limb, cracks a joke and draws laughter from the men around him. There is a new light in their eyes, a stubborn spark that refuses to be extinguished. You realize that hope, like infection, is contagious. The wards themselves are transformed. The air, once thick with the stench of decay, is now fresher, the windows thrown open to let in the salt breeze from the Bosphorus. The floors, scrubbed daily, gleam in the sunlight. The beds, though still hard and narrow, are covered with clean linens. The men rest more easily, their wounds healing faster, their spirits lifted by the simple dignity of cleanliness and order. You celebrate the first time a patient, long confined to his bed, is able to stand and take a few shaky steps. The nurses gather around, offering encouragement and applause, their pride as fierce as any mother's. The doctors, once skeptical of Nightingale's reforms, begin to acknowledge the improvements. Their gruff praise a hard-won reward. Meals, too, become an occasion for small victories. The kitchen, under Nightingale's watchful eye, produces simple but nourishing food, broths rich with flavor, bread baked fresh each morning, stews that fill the wards with the promise of comfort. You see the difference in the men's faces as they eat, the color returning to their cheeks, their strength slowly restored. There are moments of laughter amid the sorrow. You and the other nurses share stories from home, sing songs as you work, and find humor in the absurdities of daily life. A game of cards breaks out in a quiet corner. A patient sketches a caricature of a doctor, and the whole ward erupts in laughter. These moments are fleeting, but they are precious, a reminder that joy can survive even here. You take pride in your growing skills. The work that once seemed overwhelming now feels manageable, even purposeful. You become adept at cleaning wounds, at recognizing the first signs of infection, at improvising solutions when supplies run low. You learn to read the men's faces, to sense when a kind word or a gentle touch is needed. You find satisfaction in the routine, in the knowledge that your efforts make a difference, however small. The camaraderie among the nurses deepens. You support one another through the hardest days, sharing burdens and celebrating successes. You learn to trust each other, to rely on the strength of the group when your own falters. Together, you face each new challenge, buoyed by the knowledge that you are not alone. Florence Nightingale is tireless in her encouragement. She makes a point of acknowledging every improvement, every life saved, every wound that heals. Her praise is quiet but sincere, her gratitude a source of pride. She reminds you that change is built on small victories, that every step forward is a triumph over despair. You begin to believe it. Each day brings new challenges, new wounds, new fevers, new losses, but also new reasons to hope. You see the difference in the numbers, too. The mortality rate drops. The list of those discharged grows longer. The hospital, once a place of death, is slowly becoming a place of healing. At night, as you lie in your narrow bed, you reflect on the day's work. You remember the smiles, the laughter, the moments when hope triumphed over fear. You know that the war is far from over, that suffering will return with the next wave of wounded, the next outbreak of disease. But you also know that you are making a difference, that your hands, your heart, your hope are part of something larger than yourself. And so you rise each morning, ready to fight for another small victory, another moment of grace in the shadow of war. For every small victory at Scutari, there is a cost paid in quiet, personal sacrifice. The world may one day remember Florence Nightingale as a heroine and the nurses as pioneers, but you know the truth of what it means to give so much of yourself, day after day, in a place where suffering is as constant as the ticking of the hospital's old clock. The sacrifices begin with the body. You feel it in your bones, an ache that never quite fades, a stiffness in your fingers from endless scrubbing, lifting, and bending. Your feet are blistered from hours spent on cold stone floors, your back sore from lifting patients, your hands raw from harsh soap and water. Sleep is a rare luxury, snatched in brief, restless intervals between rounds. Even when you close your eyes, the cries of the wounded echo in your dreams. Illness is a constant threat. You watch as fellow nurses fall ill, their faces pale with fever, their strength sapped by the same diseases that ravage the men they care for. Some recover, returning to the wards with a new determination. Others are not so fortunate. Each loss is a blow, a reminder that no one is immune to the dangers of this place. Florence Nightingale herself is not spared. You hear whispers among the staff, how she works longer hours than anyone, how she rarely eats, how she spends her nights walking the wards, her lamp a beacon in the darkness. One evening, you see her pause, her hand pressed to her side, her face drawn with pain. Later, you learn that she has fallen ill with what the doctors call Crimean fever, a mysterious, lingering sickness that leaves her weak and exhausted. Still, she refuses to rest, insisting that her duty to the man comes before her own comfort. The sacrifices are not only physical. The emotional toll is immense. Each death weighs on you. Each failure to save a life leaves a mark. You find yourself growing attached to the men in your care. Their stories, their hopes, their fears become part of your own. When they die, it feels like a piece of you dies with them. You learn to grieve quietly, to hide your tears behind a mask of calm, to carry on even when your heart is breaking. You sacrifice the comforts of home. Letters from family are treasures. Read and reread until the paper is soft and worn. You miss the familiar sights and sounds of your old life. The warmth of a kitchen fire, the laughter of friends, the quiet peace of a Sunday morning. Here, every day is a struggle, every moment a test of endurance. There are sacrifices of spirit, too. You find yourself questioning your faith, your strength, your very purpose. There are days when the suffering seems endless, when hope is hard to find. You wonder if anything you do truly matters, if the tide of pain and death can ever be turned. In those moments, You lean on your fellow nurses, on the camaraderie that binds you together, on the small rituals that bring comfort, a prayer, a psalm, a shared memory. Yet, despite all this, you continue. You rise each morning, driven by a sense of duty, of compassion, of something larger than yourself. You find meaning in the sacrifices, a sense of purpose in the pain. You see it in the eyes of the men you care for, in the gratitude of their families, in the slow but steady improvements in the hospital. You know that your suffering is not in vain. Florence Nightingale, too, finds strength in sacrifice. Her illness leaves her changed, her body weaker, her spirit tempered by pain, but her resolve is fiercer than ever. She becomes a symbol not just of nursing, but of endurance, of the willingness to give everything for the sake of others. Her example inspires you, reminding you that the greatest acts of courage are often the quietest, the most unheralded. As you lie in bed at the end of another long day, your body aching and your mind weary, you reflect on all you have given and all you have gained. You know that you will never be the same, that the sacrifices you have made will shape you for the rest of your life. But you also know that you would choose this path again, that the chance to ease suffering, to bring hope, to make a difference, is worth every cost. And so you close your eyes, ready to rise again tomorrow, to give what you can, to bear witness to the courage and sacrifice that define life at Scutari. In the tapestry of the Crimean War, another remarkable figure moves just beyond the walls of Scutari, a woman whose courage and compassion rival even that of Florence Nightingale. Her name is Mary Seacole, and though her story is often told in the margins, her presence is felt by all who encounter her, nurse and soldier alike. Mary Seacole is a woman of many worlds. Born in Jamaica to a Scottish father and a Creole mother, she brings with her the wisdom of two continents and the resilience of a life shaped by adversity. Long before the war, she had tended to the sick during cholera and yellow fever outbreaks in the Caribbean and Central America, learning the power of herbal remedies and the importance of a gentle touch. When news of the suffering in Crimea reached her, she knew she could not remain at home. Denied a place among the official British nursing contingent, her applications rebuffed, her skills dismissed by those who could not see past her skin, Mary Seacole refused to be deterred. She made her own way to the Crimea, funding her journey with her own savings and the support of friends. Her determination is a lesson to all who meet her. When the door is closed, you find another way in. You first hear of her through the stories of soldiers returning from the front. They speak of Mother Seacole, the woman who set up her own establishment near Balaclava, not far from the battle lines. The British Hotel, as she calls it, is part canteen, part store, part field hospital, a place where soldiers can find a hot meal, a clean shirt, and, if needed, a healing hand. She is there in the thick of it, tending to the wounded and the sick, her skirts muddy, her hands stained with medicine and blood. Mary Seacole's methods are as practical as they are compassionate. She draws on her knowledge of traditional remedies, mustard poultices for chest ailments, herbal teas for fevers, ointments for wounds. She is fearless, venturing onto the battlefield itself to bring aid where it is needed most. Soldiers speak of her bravery, her laughter, her uncanny ability to lift spirits even in the darkest moments. Her presence is a balm not only to the men she cares for but also to the nurses at Scutari. Though she works outside the official channels, her reputation grows, and soon her name is spoken with respect and sometimes envy by those who witness her impact. You hear tales of her generosity, her refusal to turn anyone away, regardless of rank or nationality. She treats British, French, and Turkish soldiers alike, her compassion knowing no boundaries. Yet, Mary Seacole's path is not without obstacles. She faces prejudice and skepticism, her skills questioned by those who cannot see past her origins. Supplies are always scarce, and she must rely on her resourcefulness to keep her hotel running. There are times when she is forced to improvise, to make do with whatever she can find, a lesson you understand all too well. Despite these challenges, Mary Seacole's spirit never falters. She becomes a legend among the men, her name spoken with reverence and affection. To them, she is not just a nurse, but a mother, a healer, a friend. Her laughter is as healing as her medicine, her presence a reminder that kindness can flourish even in the midst of war. You finally meet her one afternoon when she visits Scutari to deliver a parcel of herbs and supplies. Her eyes are bright, her voice warm, her hands firm as she shakes yours. She speaks with Florence Nightingale, the two women exchanging stories and advice, their mutual respect evident despite their different backgrounds and methods. You watch them, two pillars of strength in a world of suffering, and feel a surge of pride to stand among them. Mary Seacole's legacy is not measured in statistics or official reports, but in the lives she touches, the hope she inspires, the example she sets for all who follow. In her, you see the truth that compassion knows no boundaries of race or rank, that courage is not the absence of fear but the refusal to be defeated by it. As you return to your rounds, you carry a little of her spirit with you, a reminder that healing is found not just in medicine, but in the warmth of a smile, the comfort of a kind word, the unwavering belief that every life is worth saving. As the months pass at Scutari, you begin to witness and take part in a quiet revolution. The hospital, once a place of unending misery and filth, is slowly transformed by a series of innovations that seem, at first, almost too simple to matter. Yet, these changes, born of necessity and observation, become the foundation of modern nursing and patient care. Florence Nightingale leads the way, her keen mind always searching for ways to ease suffering and speed healing. She insists on regular bathing for every patient, a practice that seems almost luxurious in a place where water is precious and soap is scarce. Yet, you see the difference it makes. Wounds heal faster, fevers break sooner, and the men themselves seem to regain a measure of dignity. Clean clothing, too, becomes a priority. You and your fellow nurses spend hours washing, mending, and distributing shirts and trousers, turning the laundry into a hub of activity and camaraderie. Nutrition is another battleground. Nightingale is relentless in her campaign for better food, lobbying the kitchen staff and the quartermaster for fresh vegetables, meat, and bread. She devises simple, nourishing meals, broths rich with marrow, stews thick with barley and root vegetables, rice puddings sweetened with raisins or honey. You see the effect in the men's faces as color returns to their cheeks and their strength slowly rebuilds. Even the act of sharing a hot meal becomes a ritual of hope and healing. Attention is paid to the air itself. Nightingale orders the windows thrown open, even in the chill of winter, to let in fresh air and drive out the miasma of disease. Fires are kept burning to dry the damp and warm the wards. You notice that the coughs become less frequent, the air less oppressive, and the men sleep more soundly. But it is not just the body that needs tending. Nightingale recognizes the toll that war takes on the mind and spirit. She encourages the men to write letters home, providing paper, ink, and even dictation for those too weak to hold a pen. You help with this task, sitting by a bedside as a soldier whispers words for his mother, his sweetheart, his children. Sometimes, you read aloud from the Bible or a favorite novel, the familiar words bringing comfort and a touch of home. Activities are organized to lift spirits and pass the long hours. There are games of cards and chess, impromptu concerts with whatever instruments can be found, and even the occasional amateur play. You marvel at the resilience of the human spirit, the way laughter and song can bloom even in the shadow of suffering. Record keeping becomes an innovation in itself. Nightingale insists on meticulous notes, the names of patients, the nature of their wounds, the treatments given, the outcomes observed. You learn to track temperatures, record symptoms, and chart recoveries. These records, at first a burden, soon become invaluable, a map of progress, a tool for learning, a testament to the power of observation and science. Communication with the outside world improves as well. Nightingale's letters to London bring not just supplies, but attention and accountability. The hospital is no longer an isolated outpost, but part of a larger effort to reform military medicine and save lives. You take pride in your growing expertise. You learn to identify the first signs of infection, to improvise splints and slings, to mix herbal teas for coughs and fevers. You become adept at comforting the dying and encouraging the living. Your hands as skilled with a bandage as with a gentle touch. The men notice the changes, too. They begin to trust the nurses, to seek your advice and comfort, to believe in the possibility of recovery. The hospital, once a place of dread, becomes a place of hope, a fragile hope, perhaps, but hope nonetheless. Florence Nightingale's innovations are not always welcomed at first. There is resistance from some doctors and orderlies, skepticism from those who cling to old ways. But the results speak for themselves. Mortality rates fall, recoveries increase, and the reputation of Scutari begins to change. You feel a quiet pride in being part of something new, something better. As you walk the wards at the end of another long day, you see the fruits of your labor in every clean bed, every healed wound, every smile of gratitude. You know that the lessons learned here will echo far beyond these walls, shaping the future of nursing and medicine for generations to come. And as you prepare for another night, another round of care and comfort, you are reminded that innovation is not always about grand gestures or dramatic discoveries. Sometimes, it is found in the simplest acts of compassion and the unwavering belief that every life is worth saving. As the days stretch into months, you begin to see that the work at Scutari is not just about tending wounds and soothing fevers. It is also about changing minds, systems, and the very future of medicine. Florence Nightingale, ever vigilant, is not content with small, local victories. She knows that to truly save lives, she must make the world see what you and your fellow nurses witness every day. It starts with numbers. Nightingale is meticulous in her record keeping, and she insists that every nurse and orderly do the same. You learn to track every patient's journey, when they arrived, what wounds or illnesses they suffered, which treatments were given, whether they recovered or succumbed. At first, it feels like a burden, one more task in an already overwhelming day. But soon, you see the patterns emerging, the stories hidden in the columns and rows. Nightingale spends her nights poring over these ledgers, her lamp burning late as she turns numbers into meaning. She calculates mortality rates, charts the rise and fall of disease, and compares the outcomes before and after the sanitary reforms. You watch as she sketches out her famous Rose diagram, a visual representation of death and survival, of how filth and neglect kill more soldiers than any Russian bullet. The diagrams are beautiful in their simplicity, but their message is stark. Nightingale's data reveals the truth, that most deaths at Scutari were preventable, that proper sanitation and care could have saved thousands. She sends her findings to London, to the War Office, to Parliament. The numbers, undeniable and unflinching, become a weapon in her campaign for change. You see the power of advocacy in action. Nightingale's reports reach the newspapers, and soon the British public is outraged. Questions are asked in Parliament, officials are held to account, and supplies begin to flow more freely. The hospital is no longer forgotten. It is at the center of a national conversation about duty, responsibility, and the value of every soldier's life. Nightingale's advocacy extends beyond statistics. She writes letters, dozens, sometimes hundreds, each one a plea for more nurses, more supplies, more reforms. She appeals to the highest authorities, using her growing influence to push for change. She is tireless, her resolve unbroken even when faced with bureaucratic indifference or outright hostility. You and your fellow nurses become part of this movement. You learn to speak up for your patients, to document every need and every shortfall. You write your own letters home, describing the reality of life at Scutari, hoping your words will reach someone who can help. You see the power of your collective voice, the way it can move mountains when joined with Nightingale's. There are setbacks, of course. Change is slow, and resistance is fierce. Some officials dismiss Nightingale's findings. Others question her methods or her motives. But the evidence is irrefutable, and slowly, grudgingly, the system begins to shift. New hospitals are built with sanitation in mind. New protocols are established, and the lessons of Scutari begin to spread across the British Empire. You feel a sense of pride in being part of something larger than yourself. The work is still hard, the suffering still immense, but now there is a sense of purpose, a belief that every act of care, every record kept, every letter sent is a step toward a better future. Florence Nightingale's use of data is revolutionary, but it is her advocacy, her refusal to accept the status quo, her insistence that every life matters, that truly changes the world. You see in her a model of leadership that is both compassionate and relentless, grounded in evidence and driven by empathy. As you walk the wards, ledger in hand, you know that the story of Scutari is not just one of suffering, but of transformation. The numbers you record are more than statistics. They are the lives of men who might otherwise have been forgotten. Your work, humble as it may seem, is part of a movement that will echo through history. And as you prepare for another day, another round of care and advocacy, you carry with you the knowledge that change is possible, not just through grand gestures, but through the careful, persistent work of those who refuse to look away. The guns fall silent at last. After years of relentless fighting, the Crimean War draws to a close, leaving behind a landscape scarred by battle and a generation forever changed. The hospital at Scutari, once a place of chaos and despair, now stands as a testament to endurance, compassion, and the power of reform. As the wounded are finally sent home or to convalesce elsewhere, you find yourself reflecting on the journey that brought you here and the legacy that will endure long after the war is over. The departure of soldiers is bittersweet. Each man who leaves is a victory, a sign that healing is possible. Yet, the hospital remains filled with those whose wounds are deep, both visible and invisible. You help pack their belongings, write letters to families, and offer what comfort you can. The bonds formed in these halls are strong, forged in shared suffering and mutual care. Florence Nightingale prepares to return to England, her health fragile, but her spirit unbroken. You watch as she bids farewell to the nurses, the doctors, and the patients, her eyes shining with gratitude and hope. Her work here is far from finished, but the foundation has been laid. She promises to continue the fight for better care, better hospitals, and better lives for those who serve. The nurses, too, prepare to leave. Some will return home, forever changed by their experiences. Others will carry on the work, inspired to pursue nursing as a profession. You feel a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the worst is over, sorrow for the friends lost, and the suffering endured. Back in England, Nightingale's reports and advocacy lead to sweeping reforms. The horrors of Scutari spark a revolution in military medicine, with new hospitals designed for sanitation and comfort, new training programs for nurses, and a greater emphasis on hygiene and patient care. The profession of nursing is transformed from a lowly task into a respected vocation, with Nightingale as its pioneering figurehead. You take pride in knowing that your work contributed to this change. The lessons learned in the grim wards of Scutari ripple outward, influencing hospitals and healthcare systems around the world. The importance of cleanliness, nutrition, fresh air, and compassionate care becomes widely recognized, saving countless lives in conflicts and peacetime alike. The legacy of the Crimean nurses is not just in statistics or reforms, but in the stories carried home by the men they cared for. Stories of kindness, courage, and humanity in the darkest of times. These stories inspire future generations of nurses, doctors, and caregivers to uphold the ideals forged in the crucible of war. As you leave Scutari behind, you carry with you memories both painful and precious. You remember the faces of the men you tended, the friendships formed with fellow nurses, the long nights, and small victories. You know that the war has changed you, shaped you in ways you are only beginning to understand. Yet, there is hope. The world is beginning to see the value of nursing, the power of compassion, and the necessity of reform. The sacrifices made here will not be forgotten. They will live on in every hospital ward, every nurse's tender touch, every life saved. And so you step forward into the future, ready to carry the torch lit in Scutari's wards, a light that will guide the way for those who come after, a beacon of care and courage in a world that still needs both. As the dust of the Crimean War settles, the story of Florence Nightingale emerges not just as a tale of battlefield nursing, but as the foundation of modern healthcare and nursing as a respected profession. Returning to England a heroine, Nightingale's impact would ripple far beyond the wards of Scutari, shaping the future of medicine, military care, and public health for generations to come. Upon her return, Nightingale was greeted with acclaim, but also faced the daunting task of transforming the British military medical system. She meticulously documented the conditions she had witnessed: the overcrowded, filthy hospitals, the rampant disease, and the lack of basic supplies and sanitation that had caused more deaths than battle wounds. Using her detailed records and pioneering statistical methods, including her famous coxcomb diagrams, she demonstrated unequivocally that poor sanitation was the primary killer of soldiers. Her advocacy led to the establishment of the Royal Commission on the Health of the Army, which implemented sweeping reforms in military hospitals. The Nightingale Fund was created from public donations, enabling her to found the world's first professional nursing school at St. Thomas' Hospital in London in 1860. This institution set the standard for nursing education, emphasizing hygiene, patient care, and the importance of a clean environment, principles Nightingale had championed during the war. Nightingale's influence extended beyond nursing education. She authored several foundational texts, including Notes on Nursing, 1859, which became essential reading not only for nurses, but for anyone involved in caregiving. Her work helped professionalize nursing, opening the field to respectable women and elevating the role of nurses from mere attendants to skilled healthcare providers. Her reforms also transformed hospital design and administration, emphasizing ventilation, sanitation, and the humane treatment of patients. Nightingale's insistence that nurses focus on creating a sanitary and pleasant environment rather than mastering all medical diseases revolutionized patient care and laid the groundwork for modern nursing theory. Throughout her life, Nightingale continued to campaign for public health improvements, influencing civilian hospitals and military medical practices alike. She was the first woman awarded the Order of Merit and was recognized internationally for her pioneering contributions. Today, Florence Nightingale is remembered as the Lady with the Lamp, a symbol of compassionate care and relentless dedication. International Nurses Day is celebrated on her birthday, honoring her enduring legacy. Her work not only saved countless lives during the Crimean War, but also transformed nursing into a profession defined by skill, science, and humanity, a legacy that continues to guide healthcare worldwide. As you reflect on the journey through the Crimean War, it becomes clear that Nightingale's story is not just one of war and suffering, but of hope, innovation, and the power of one person's vision to change the world.